Hey guys, welcome to another video. What you're about to watch here is an interview I recently shot with a dear friend of mine, Rebecca Tzigany. Rebecca is the author of a really cool book called Venus and Her Lover, Transcending Myth, Sexuality, and Ourselves, and she has a tremendous knowledge in the area of helping people deal with their traumas around relationships, and their traumas around their relationships to them, their relationship to themselves, and how to actually communicate with one another. And so she's a massive staple in our local community, as pretty much anytime somebody has a conflict with another person and it can't be resolved, they just pick up the phone and call Rebecca, and they do a session with her and do an intervention kind of thing, or a mediation. So she's like the go-to person to help people with those kind of issues here. And she has helped me more than once in my life in many, many ways. And she's a dear friend of mine. But she's also an incredible person for another reason. You know, right now on the planet, there are so many people right now losing faith, losing hope, and moving into apathy for reasons which are easy to understand. And then there are many other people who I've witnessed who are totally going into bliss and getting into their power and getting into their strength and actually doing something to make a difference in their communities and in the world. Because let's face it, now is the time to actually make a difference. Now is the time to decide what you stand for and what you don't. And she's doing that kind of work here in a local community. She's bringing people together. She's giving people hope and strength and uniting people together in ways that, well, in a way that is, I can't talk about it here right now because it's due to the sensitive nature of, the whole situation and the global situation, but it's extremely powerful and it's bringing people together, and it's perhaps more effective than she would give herself credit for. And I really wanted to have her on the show to share some of her magic with you, some of her wisdom, and ask us some powerful questions. So I hope you enjoy the show and that you get some value out of it. And I've linked everything from Rebecca down below this video if you're watching this on YouTube or my blog. Enjoy the video. Rebecca, thanks for being here with me today.
It's a pleasure.
So the last time that we did an interview, we titled it Busting Loose Out of the Matrix, something like that. And you had some great things to share from your experience. But that was 6 years ago, I think.
Yeah, really, time flies.
And that was a relevant topic then, but here we are, it's 2021. The very thing that you've been, in a sense, as far as I understand, getting downloads of your whole life. It's part of your book. The thing that we've all been preparing for seems to be unfolding worldwide.
It's here.
It's here. We don't need to talk about what it is too much. I think everybody gets it. And today, at the present moment, vaccines are being rolled out throughout the world. The majority of the population is okay with everything as it is and is buying their narrative. And yet there are many people who are waking up or who have been awake for a while. And I'm sure if you're watching this like me, you're wondering, what do I do? How do I carry myself in this situation? How do I deal with the insanity? How do I center myself? Amidst many other questions for which there are very little answers at the moment. And that's why I wanted to have you here on the show, because you're a dear friend of mine. And I deeply respect you for who you are, but also for what you do and the actions you take and the energy that you embody. It gives me strength. Yeah, particularly one of leadership around community. And that's what I wanted to open up this discussion with. Of what do you see as the most beneficial, energetic to embody during these times? What motivates you to show up the way you do with the community actions that you take?
Well, on the big picture, we've got big players. And there's a big agenda rolling out that is targeted at the frequency held by most people. And there's a lot of fear being pumped out, and because when people are in fear, they retreat down out of the prefrontal cortex and into the reptilian brain, which is just based on survival. And so to keep people in fear is to keep people in fear of death and the desire to survive. So that's what's playing at the, on the big screen of the earth. But luckily we live at a a multiplex reality. We can play all kinds of movies. So how I've been responding, aside from my work on a global scale, with talks and my books and, information that I put out, I have been focused on community because the power of individuals coming together creates synergy. And there's a reason why we are forbidden to gather. Because when we get together, sure, people are getting together online. And you get to have an exchange of ideas and so forth, and it's mostly mental. When you're with people physically, however, you bring all your bodies. You bring your emotional body and your physical body and your spiritual body and your mental body. And when we're together, we merge those fields. And that's where creativity can happen. That's where, oh, you have an idea and that sparks me. And then someone else, oh, yeah, that reminds me of, because there are ideas propagating in a field. So that's one reason I'm doing community efforts. Also because it's a basic human need. We need to touch one another. We need to hug one another. We need to look into one another's eyes. Because when we're looking into one another's eyes, we're getting all kinds of facial cues. If you don't have a mask on. But all kinds of body energy and my heart field. The Institute of Heart Math has measured the electromagnetic field of the heart as multiple times greater than that of the brain. So if I'm feeling loving toward you, my heart field expands, you feel that, then we can have entrainment. We can have, again, this clear field where creativity and synergy can happen. So in community, which these days has to be secret, it's illegal for people to get together. However, I don't think that should stop anybody, to get together with whoever you want and let those energetics unfold. Now, most people watching, you're probably pretty awake. You've probably been doing your own developmental work. You've been doing your shadow work. You've been doing your spiritual practices. So that has opened you up to a greater view of the world and what's available to you. So getting together with people of like mind and heart then allows our creativity, because the answers of how to address this crisis are not going to come from a leader or one person or a guru. I think the Dalai Lama said, the next Buddha will be the Sangha, which means the community. So, if we're the ones who need to bring in the next enlightenment or the next leap of evolution for humanity, then we need to get together. That's why I do community work.
Like, they primarily are just pumping out fear and fear and fear and fear and fear. And people, of course, are at some level buying into it. But at what point do you have that, split where you're like, enough, I'm going to go with what's in my heart, even if it scares me, even if it's risky, even if it means breaking the law. Remember, I think it was Martin Luther King in one of his speeches said, one of the lines in there says something about laws, that laws are great and just laws are like to be upheld, but unjust laws, like you have a duty, a patriotic duty to disobey them and to not go along with the narrative.
Yeah, well, there's something called natural law. And Mark Passio talks a lot about that. Other people do too. And it's important to distinguish man-made laws from natural law. Because natural law, you can't get around it. It's, if you harm somebody, you've created a karma with that and you're going to get your just desserts. Or rather, the way I don't see it so much like that. I see it like you're going to live that reality. So, for example, why do generals send soldiers to war? Are the generals killing people with their guns? No. They're having soldiers kill people with their guns because they will get the karma. The soldiers will get the karma for killing someone else. And in what used to be, they call it the Incan Empire. It wasn't really an empire in South America. There was the idea of, here in Tawantinsuyu, that was the name of the Incan lands, when there was a dispute between peoples, essentially they I don't know if they took volunteers or voted or whatever, but they took a representative of each and put them in the ring, so to speak. And they fought to the death. Because, first of all, the karma would be on the person who was killing. Or the cacique, or whatever they called the judge of that round, could call it. We're going to call this a draw, but it had to be at the request of those who were fighting. And there's something about that, because when you, like, say you're strangling somebody, you feel, the life pulse of the person that you're going to kill. And if you have a dispute with someone, you're like, wow, I'm willing to kill for this. So this was a way that disputes were resolved here. A fight to the death, or it could be called by either side. Like, that's it. That's enough. We're going to work this out. And that makes a whole lot more sense to me. Like in the Vietnam War, there were 40,000 dead American soldiers who will have to answer for the karma of the people they killed. The generals, the system is set up so that the generals don't get that. They will have, certainly they're living the reality of the adversary, but it's different than if they had actually killed somebody. So this is all about personal responsibility. And if you think there's unjust laws, then how can you live according to love and not fear? Because now the cost for not going along with the crowd is higher. For those of us who didn't make a decision about what we think is fair, or the kind of, like in terms of care of the earth, or our economic system, or, social justice. If we hadn't taken a stand yet, now the cost is going to be higher, because we're at a time where you're either on one side of the fence or the other. And we could call this different things, and we could use the love-fear as one of the measures. Because when we're afraid, and even if it's not a crushing fear, the result is nonetheless that we contract, because we have to protect ourselves from whatever it is we're afraid of. Or if we are not wanting to follow unjust laws, then we have to be really smart. And there's also the open-ended strategy of love. So I'll give you an example. Some weeks ago, I was in a public place, and I was not wearing a mask. And the police, it was an open-air market where, the police were coming in, and you could see everyone is like putting on their masks. And I was just feeling spunky at the moment, and so I walked up to these 5 cops. I don't have a mask on, and they've got a puppet because they want to explain to people why you must wear masks. So I asked them. I came in, I learned this technique, you could say, or it's just an approach with people who think they have authority. I always want them to feel included. I know that they were trained in adversarial thinking, so I consciously expand my heart field to include them. So I walked up, expanding my heart field. I asked them, well, what are you here doing? Oh, we're here to show people, about the dangers and why you need to wear a mask. I said, wow, so you really care about this community. You don't want people getting sick. Is that right? Yeah. So anyway, the conversation, well, could you show me what you're what you are teaching. And so we went through that. And then I used the word pandemic. And one of the cops was like, what did you call it? I said a plandemic. He goes, do you think this was planned? I'm like, yes, I do. I think it was planned, you know, for decades, a decade at least. And he's like, what do you mean? So I, you know, start to weave in different pieces of the story as I understand it. And then another cop's like, well, we should find out who's behind that then. Because I said, you know, the main goal is to destroy economies. This was
at the very least.
Yeah, at the very least. And I said, well, how do you notice it in the city that you come from? How's businesses? Oh, things are a disaster. Mom and pop businesses are going out of business. I said, yeah, so it might make sense then to have something that would transfer the wealth and business into the hands of corporate chains. And they're like, yeah, that's right. That's what's happening. So I'm going on about this. And then one of the cops is like, well, if, you know, we should find out who's doing this. I said, oh, we know. He's like, we do? Well, we should, you know, they should be in jail. I'm like, yes, they're criminals. It's true. But, you know, they're above jails. So anyway, I'm having this conversation. It was about 20 minutes. And at the end, I said, would you like some more information? And I happened to have some information sheets on me. I gave it to them. I explained to them about the health effects of wearing masks. And, oh, I'm a breathwork therapist, and I studied breathing, and this is the percent of oxygen that you're reducing in your brain, and blah, blah, blah. You know, they were very interested. And at the end, you know, they theoretically should have cited me for not wearing a mask. In the end, they thanked me, and I walked away. The reason is this was a successful story is because they were not RoboCops. I could see their faces. I mean, they had masks on, but I could make eye contact. I could expand my heart field and include them as other fellow humans. And I wasn't adversarial. And that's a bit destabilizing for people like police who are trained to recognize adversaries. So it was love. I was using love as my way to remind us all, them and me, that we're all in this together. And I said, that was one of the last things I said to him. It's like, you know, we're only going to get through this pandemic and quarantine if we work together. And they're like, yeah, that's right. And so I'm sure after I walked away, they were like, wait a minute.
What happened? Did she cast a spell on us?
Yes, I did. It was a spell of love. Mm-hmm. And so I have to feel secure in that. I have to be completely grounded in that reality if I'm going to do something like that. And that means I have to have worked out all my adversarial issues within myself before I approach somebody like that. But that's the kind of transformation that can just happen in a second.
I've had my own interactions with police officers over the past year and a half in multiple countries, from Mexico to Spain. Not all of them as smooth as that, because I'm still learning how to hold that. And it's difficult when you don't speak the language entirely fluently. Like, I'm fluentish in Spanish. But what I learned from that, and what I'm learning throughout this whole experience, is coming back to what you said earlier, that there's no real easy answer for this, and there's no like busting through this with force. And that's what you see, like most of our programming out there in the world, as people are moving through the stages of grief, because we are in a global grief process, I believe. And the stages are denial, and then anger, and then I believe acceptance and gratitude.
Well, you have to fight with it first. Denial, and then bargaining
And anger. Okay, and I think then it's anger.
Yeah,
perhaps. So I think most people have been in denial, And then there's then the anger, and so you find something to lash out, or people are falling into apathy as well.
Yeah.
But it's still a very polarized thing. You're like, this is the problem, or the masks are the problem, or that. And that's where they get us by the balls, because the whole system is designed to manipulate people with what you call the trauma-based control manipulation system, which I'd love to talk about a little bit later down the line. All right. But like everything, all the tools that we've had up until now that like worked, that's out the window. You know, normally in life, there's a solution for everything. And for this, there really isn't. And people would like to believe that there is a quick one, but it's not. It's like beyond us, which is what's also exciting, because we have to rise up to a very different level to actually get outside of this.
Yeah, we have to become a greater human now.
Yeah.
And that's a leap. But we either make this leap or we perish. You know, like the bumper sticker, evolve or die.
Yeah. And in many ways, you have to also be okay with that. Because if you're not, then you're in a fighting place, like fighting for survival. Like maybe, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but like consider the fact that like maybe it's totally over. Maybe everything is lost. Maybe humanity is not supposed to make it. Like maybe that's just part of the plan. Like, can we accept that and be okay with that?
And so, if that were to be true, how would you want to spend your last moments? Right? How would you want to... We're in the 6th grade extinction. It wasn't ever guaranteed we were going to make it. So if we are going to perish as the organic human race, which is a very real possibility, then how do I want to live? I want to live free. I want to live in love. Because, and then when my moment, my last breath on earth happens, it'll be like, all right, I did it.
Should we talk about the trauma-based manipulation control system?
Yeah.
It seems like it wants to come up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I wrote this book, and my work for the past 20 years has been this tantric art project with my collaborator, James Bertrand. And it's a project that includes art, erotic art and poetry, and it's a tantric approach. And so I always thought I would get to this stage and be like teaching loving, right? It'd be so wonderful. And what I found, why I mostly get invited to conferences and, workshops, what do people want me to teach? They want me to teach about the slave system. Which, yes, we have to know where we're coming from. And just like just like Morpheus said to Neo in the Matrix, you were born a slave. We all were. And so I give talks about the dominator system and then how to get free from it. So the dominator system is a system of control. I'm quoting the Matrix again. It's a system of control. That's what the Matrix is. And it's based on a pyramid. And many of us that gather in community, you may notice, we sit in a circle, right? So it's the circle versus the pyramid. Because in the circle, everyone is facing the center, which is our common and shared ideals. And in the dominator system, the pyramid, there's the peons at the bottom, the slaves, and then there's the middle management, which is got to keep the slaves on the plantation, and that's like presidents of countries and CEOs and bankers. And then there's the ones who are calling the shots. And how far you go up the pyramid is how far down you go down the rabbit hole, because the layers are insulated. You can know who's below you, but you're not going to know. You only know your immediate superiors, because they're the ones who can slap you down, because the dominator system is based on force or the threat of force. It's based on fear and on violence. So what keeps everyone in line is this knowing that if you buck the system, they're going to hurt you. Now, this is the system for countries, for the economic system, for the church, for families. You know, the father in the traditional family was the one who would whip the kids and whip them in line. Or the mother could help with that too. But it was based on violence. So that you, as a child, we were all traumatized by that system. I mean, some of us had more loving parents, and that helped to a large degree. However, that's not the system itself isn't the only tactic. In my work as a therapist and doing hypnotherapy with my clients, and I started hearing intergenerational trauma, and I realized war is a trauma that can pass through the generations. So that's a lot of bang for your buck. So war is one of the main strategies. And then the other main strategy is sexual trauma, and in this case, sexual trauma of children. Because if you can traumatize a child, then what happens when we're traumatized? In order to survive, especially as children, we have to fragment our psyche, because living with that trauma is too painful. So if we fragment it and segment it, then we put part of it, hide it away. So now you've got victims of sexual abuse who don't even remember, who don't even know. So it's, how do you heal yourself from something you can't even identify? I mean, like through hypnosis, we can get to it, but you have to recognize that and get yourself to a hypnotherapist and look at your patterns. So, because of my work in sexuality and looking at sexual trauma of children, which is horrific, it's awful. How could you do that to children? Well, now we know it's extremely common. And why is child trafficking something that's well known? Because it's happening. And that's another deep rabbit hole about why they're trafficking children. But just to stick with the result of trauma, when you fragment your personality, then the part that's hurt, the wound, is hidden, and we call that the shadow. And Jung identified that as, the unconscious that is too painful to, you can't think of it, it's too painful. But that means a part of your body energy and a part of your psyche is not online. And that means it's accessible to others. Mm. So the advertisers know this. Maybe they don't know exactly that mechanism, but they understand how it works. They're going to market to you based on your traumas. And all the control systems, whether it be the church or the education system, they know that too. So if they can trigger or start to get close to your wound, you're just going to comply. Like, okay, I'll do whatever you say, just don't bring me to that uncomfortable place again. I mean, all this is done subconsciously. So it's a perfect control system because I don't want to feel what's in my shadow, because I don't want to relive that horrible experience. I myself install the gatekeeper. I put in the prison guard to keep me from knowing. So it's a prison system, a prison planet, some people call it, where we are the prisoners and the prison guards. It's an ingenious system. A problem that they're having is that people are waking up and they're doing shadow work. And they're like, okay, why do I feel disempowered around men? Or, why do I have this knee-jerk reaction that isn't even something I believe in? So as with my clients, I'll say, if something triggers you, gives you an automatic reaction, then you have to understand who's running that automatic reaction. That's the trail that you can take down into your own wounds with love for yourself, with love for the child who was probably traumatized, to reveal it. Now, and to feel it. The reason I love breathwork as a therapy is because it involves the emotional body. I mean, you can do talk therapy, and that's very important. But in terms of sexual trauma, I really believe that if you can't feel it, you can't heal it. So, like breathwork or other therapies, I'm going for feel it, because once it's brought out, my experience has been that you can heal the emotion with or without having the memory, and then you're on your way to healing. I mean, it's helpful to have the memory. We want to know what happened, but I'm not sure it's entirely necessary. In my work in the healing arts, if people can feel it, then we can move that energy. And what happens? The emotion evolves, and then you're into a whole new reality, which you can construct consciously instead of subconsciously having to protect yourself with armoring. Like most of us had to have body armoring installed so that we can't be touched deeply because we were violated. And so it works with all the bodies, the physical body. And with sexual trauma, I generally find, like at a certain point, I'll refer my clients to a somatic sexologist, someone who is trained to touch people in their yonis or the prostate where the trauma happened, to release the trauma, the panic, the fear, the terror that's held in the tissues. So there's like a physical component, there's the emotional component, feeling the emotions. It helps if we have the mental story, because then we can go, well, no wonder, I didn't have self-confidence for the first 40 years of my life, right? We can explain it to ourselves. And these are all steps that we get to do in our spiritual evolution. Now, a lot of people would like to do spiritual bypassing, which is like, I don't want to feel those things because they are so uncomfortable. So I'm just going to transcend them all and go into Buddhahood. Okay, you can do that. And in fact, the tantric insight is that you transcend it all and realize it's all illusion that you set up and you agreed to play the game. But then you have to come back into the body and get everything lined up. And with sexual trauma, which unfortunately, I don't think we have a clue about the statistics. I've read everything from 30% of people to 70% of people, and that could be not be right. We have work to do. But when we do that work, then we liberate ourselves, and then we possess all of our bodies. So when what's rolling down the pike at us right now, we can call up everything we got, which, if you've done the spiritual work, that's plugged into infinite source. So you have infinite power to handle this, which we're going to need, which we need right now.
Definitely. Well, it brings me to one of my favorite topics, trauma work, because that's what I've been focusing a big part of my life the past 2-3 years has been healing my own self and re-traumatizing or uncovering traumas that I've had and healing myself. But this really is connected to like the beginning of our topic conversation, is like, why are people so easily manipulated, right? Sure, if you're watching this, you've probably had maybe not, but maybe you've had these moments where you're like, people you've known that you thought were awake or were in, and all of a sudden they're just not, and by awake I mean at least in the know of like what's going on, but they're turning the other way and following the mainstream narrative or whatever. And I don't want to judge here because everything is okay as well, and that's a big part of getting through to people is being totally loving and accepting of their choices, right? But I'm sure you've had these moments of like, what? Like, how? Or just looking out there into the world, like, how is this possible? How are billions of people being manipulated? And why are we so docile? And what is the difference of someone who's able to remain in their power and their sovereignty and their authority and to be in that place versus someone who's versus being in a place where it's harder to step up to your own strength and power? And I believe you've nailed it. It's like doing the trauma work and doing the actual shadow work. And I was recently listening to a talk by one of my favorite teachers, Kyle Cease, and he was saying how it's very interesting how if you look out and talk to people and just experience people, I'm sure you're seeing this as a therapist as well, as we're going through this, everybody responds in a different way, and it usually is linked to their core trauma. So if you were locked in the closet by, when you were 5 and something terrible happened to you and you have this feeling of being trapped, you'll feel really trapped by this. If you're, gone through a lot of sadness and disempowerment, maybe you feel really disempowered and very, very sad, or maybe very, very angry, depending on what your core patterns are. For me, it's more of this feeling of feeling insignificant, because my whole life I've been fighting to create my own significance based to cover up the insignificance.
Really? You? Insignificant? You're such a powerhouse.
Guess why I do that.
Yeah, really. Overcompensating.
Yeah. And so and whatever emotional thing you fall into, it's really good to become aware of it, because whatever emotional thing you're falling into, that's also manipulation. And I've been watching personally how they've been using trauma throughout, definitely in the media. It's like story, narrative, trigger, and it's not just to manipulate perception. It's always there to trigger certain core trauma, to trigger a certain archetype. So a lot of people have father issues, right? Mm-hmm. So guess who got to be the archetype for everybody's father issues? Well, last year, right? Or throughout the past 4 years. It doesn't take a while to figure that out on TV. It's like, story about this person. Oh my God, this is a terrible president, blah, blah, blah. If you've got father issues, you would immediately have those things triggered if you believe the narrative, and they would fall down the line of that perception and down the rabbit hole, right? So it's almost as if like the way through this is, yes, of course, rise up in love and in your power, but to do that, you have to be willing to face your own shadow and your own darkness.
So how have you gotten through your traumas? And what advice would you give people who just want to start out? To whoa, if I was traumatized and I don't remember, how do I start?
And for me, the most powerful tool I've found to go get to is Bufo. That's why I got involved with that medicine. Yeah, but I'm no expert on trauma release work, and it's a very deep field.
Yeah. But you are on your journey, and you've laid down tracks.
Yeah,
it's important for us to have this conversation and understand all that it includes. We're like fish trying to describe water, right? We were all born into a trauma-based mind control system. Now, many of us, I want to create a new world, new earth, let's do it. So what I'm very mindful of in the things that I have a hand in are that we create from our highest expression of ourselves and not in reaction to. It's very tricky because naturally we're in reaction to all the trauma we just went through, or the injustices, or the pain and suffering, and so that's why I see the new organic human being birthed through us now. If we take that responsibility seriously, then we need to clear the space, right, so that literally the new babies being born can be born in a safe environment. And I worked many years as an environmentalist, and I also worked as a doula. And I used to say, if I weren't spending so much time in environmentalism, caring for Mother Earth, I would have been a birth activist, because I recognized that the trauma-based mind control system starts with minute 1. And I read, this is years ago, 30 years ago, I read a book called Ideal Birth by Sandra Ray, and she was one of the early rebirthers, and she was regressing people to the moment of their birth. And what they were describing was coming into, with their awareness, coming into the world, and then bam, getting into the shock of medical birth. And something she said was, we learn the most about life in the first minute of life. And the next greatest amount of information we take in is in the second minute of life. And then it goes downhill from there till about age 6, when our personalities are formed. So then when you look at something like circumcision, well, yeah, let's traumatize boys at their root, at their sexual pole, a place where they can have a masculine identity. Let's horribly mutilate babies within the first couple days of life. Wow. When I realized that, it's like, that's very efficient. That is, and since I work in sexuality, the results of that they go for life for most men. As they try to come into their power. But if the masculine principle is the one that's going to forge ahead and needs to protect and could stand up against a control system, then you'd need to traumatize all the boys.
Mm-hmm.
You'd want to cut them from the root of their power. And so you do it systematically and systemically and go for 100% traumatization. And of course, if you somehow slip through that, if your parents were awake and aware enough about that, then, okay, we're going to get it with a, authoritarian family. And if somehow you have a loving family, well, then let's get you in the church, load you up with shame and guilt. And if somehow you escape that, well, then we're going to get you in the school where we're going to shame you and, cut you down. And so the whole system is designed for that. So if you survived, congratulations. Here we are. We made it. And now we've got to make another leap.
I'm starting to recognize that there is a task in front, or an opportunity. It's interesting that in Chinese, the word danger and opportunity are similar.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel both. But there is an opportunity. And I've been picking it up seemingly like through the threads of my existence in some moments, saying, this is the way forward. This is the way forward. And it has a lot to do with community and standing up in the present moment for yourself and reclaiming your authority. It seems, like that is the way forward.
Yes.
And whether you're taking action or not, like for some people it might just be being in peace and holding that frequency, right? Or it could actually be taking some sort of action. I'm curious, how are you handling that challenge, and what scares the shit out of you?
You know what? Since the pandemic happened, I feel like I got shot out of a cannon. And so many of my peers were all saying the same thing, I was born for this moment. All the years I've spent trying to get free and my healing process and, diving into my shadow and healing and reclaiming myself were so that I would have enough personal power to stand in this moment. So in terms of advice, I would say to anyone here, I hope you have a daily spiritual practice, because we got to plug in every day to reality, the greater reality. We need to plug in every day to our source of strength, which is our nature. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So whether it's yoga or meditation or jogging or swimming or whatever gets you in that zone where you feel, this is who I am. This is me. This is my authentic energy. So that's number one. And then join with like-minded people, because we can then create a love field. We're only going to get this through transcending the false dichotomy that's being handed to us. And so that's what I do. I create community gatherings and events and encounters. And what's amazing, in fact, can I say about your birthday party?
Yeah, sure.
So our community is waking up and showing up. So it's normal for us, like at Casper's birthday party, he had several exercises planned that were truth-telling exercises, encountering exercises, presence exercises. And then we did a kind of game of counseling, you know, like you're the counselor for the moment. Like one counselor stands up and he only counsels in pantomime. Or, you know, I stood up and I said, I'm a relationship counselor. And then people are shooting questions. It was really fun. So we're playing parlor games that are very meaningful, in which we're authentic with one another. So that meant that as we were changing partners in the exercises, that we were really getting to know the person in front of us. Even though we're all friends, getting to know them better. And when we are authentic, we then have authority. So I have a sign here in my office. It's right over there. It says, authenticity, authority, author. So that since I wrote a book, I always felt I had those words in front of me over the years I was writing the book. I cannot claim to be an author unless I have the authority to say what I'm saying, which I have gained through my authentic experience. So the party games that you did at your birthday allowed us to exercise our authenticity. And so those can be facing one another and eye gazing without saying anything. They can be breathing exercises. They can be the exercises you had, like some of the questions you asked for us to ask one another were.
Tell me what scares you about this during this, your greatest fear during this time. Tell me what you're grateful for during this time.
Yes. How do you feel? That was one of them. How do you feel right now?
Tell me what you feel.
Tell me what, that's right. Tell me what you feel.
Yeah,
there was a way to phrase it. So, small groups of people can come together and do this kind of work. And as we know one another, and we're showing up with our best selves, and also recognizing that, oh, well, I have my shadow and I've got my, then I can have the trust with someone to say, wow, you know, I'm going through a hard time, and this whole thing about, you know, the pedophilia is really freaking me out, and I don't know, you know, I don't know why it affects me so much. And so anyway, we go through it together. So we can help one another to heal. But beyond that, we come together, like we did at your birthday, and celebrate together. Have fun. And this, by the way, was a non-alcohol party. So
everybody's going to want to come to my next birthday party.
That's right.
We're really doing a great pitch for it.
So mark your calendars. But it might be on a boat.
It will be.
It will be. So this celebration together, any of you who have been in lockdown and are feeling depressed, which is a natural reaction of not having enough human contact, then that is to weaken you and help you be a sheeple, help you be a disempowered person who will go along with whatever agenda somebody else has. But when we come together in trust, in celebration, in raw vulnerability, we can then tap into more of our infinite selves. And anyone who's done meditation and gotten to that samadhi place, like, oh, I I see it all. It's all perfect. Knows that we're just here for a moment and we get to play while we're here. Right now it looks like we're playing in some kind of nightmare. But actually, and this is true with most of my peers, I know there's a nightmare going on and I'm keenly aware of it and I keep up with that news. But my life is like this beautiful dream. I walk in my garden in the morning and I'm like, this is heaven on earth. I'm so thrilled to be here. Or when we get together, even just with another friend, the kind of sharing that we're doing is like, wow, this is really beautiful. And we can feel our hearts. This is our only way through this, because I would say that those who have planned this, let's just say that they've lost touch with humanity, with their human knowingness. So it's more of an AI orientation. It's more of a mental, just mostly in the mental body and the material plane. So if this is what this is designed for us to tune in to just our minds, drive us down into the reptilian brainstem, stay in the material plane where we're afraid of some virus or some, bug that's going to get us, or we're afraid of other humans. So we're in survival mode in the material plane. And then we're being jacked around with these contradictory, if you notice the news is contradictory so often, and confusion. If we end up in mental confusion, then we're completely manipulatable. So now we need our spiritual practices more than ever. We need to get free more than ever, and we need one another more than ever. I truly believe that it is together that we're going to get through this. The next Buddha is the Sangha. It's the community.
Would you like to talk about your book before we cut it off?
Oh yeah, I wrote a book.
If I may, yeah. To give an intro to Rebecca's work from my personal experience, I've gone through a lot of relationship dynamic trauma-based kind of realities throughout my life, so I haven't had it easy in my love life. It wasn't until I started working with Rebecca that I started to have some resemblance of peace, and then more and more and more down the line. She's amazing in her work with couples, with people experiencing problems and challenges around relationships and sexuality. And I couldn't recommend her enough if you want to work with her or study her material. As you've heard her talk, she's talking from a place of authority because she's been there and done that, and she has a tremendous heart. And she's a real staple in the community. So, please talk about the book.
Yeah, thank you. So, the memoir I wrote is in 2 volumes. This is volume 1. Will this show up right side?
I'll just put it up. I'll make a picture.
Okay. And it's an adventure story. It's a detective story because my partner at the time and I were asking the question, what started the war between the sexes? And so that's one of the threads of the story, going back through history, anthropology, archaeology, Earth's hidden history, mythology. What happened to men and women? Why are we in this division? Why is that gap so hard to bridge? And I traced it. I traced it back, and by the end of volume 2, those who stick through it to the end get to the beginning, which I traced it back to ancient Sumer, when the dominator system was installed. And in that journey of many years, I started recovering my memories. And I remembered actually being there at that time. And then everything made sense. Oh, I have a karmic duty to tell this story. So that's like a broad arc of the story, but it goes through a lot of tantric philosophy, both classical tantra and neo-tantra. It calls upon a lot of mythology, and science. It was my own journey, my own personal uncovering of my sexual shadows, my burning desire to get free, and what I was willing to do to get free. And the whole project was born from love. That my partner James one day just said, I want to make some erotic paintings of you because I'm so thrilled with our sexual connection. It's so transcendental. It's so amazing. I want to capture it on canvas. And that led to 64 life-size paintings of sexual scenes of not just him and me standing in for the archetypes of Mars and Venus, in other words, man and woman. But other people who started piling into the project that were like, why are these people showing up? Well, they were other deities. So the project itself is about this mythology, like reinventing the dysfunctional myths of the masculine and the feminine and saying, let's make a new story. We need a new story for a new time. And so the book is a deep dive. It's sexy adventures. And it's on the website venusandherlover.com. Audiobook, ebook, and paperback and hardcover. So I invite you to jump on board. It's quite a journey.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for sharing everything you shared today. I'm sure there's so much more we could talk about, but I think it's nice to cut off what we cut off. It's a really powerful message. Yeah, love to have you back.
And remember, we're all in this together. Thank you, Casper. I'm glad to be in it with you.
Hey there, thanks for watching. Listen, if you enjoyed this video and you want to make sure to get more of my stuff, I highly recommend that you go to my website. The link is down below. And if you're already watching this on my website and you haven't already, just scroll up and put your email address in this box there and sign up for my email newsletter. There's also a link there to my Telegram channel once you do that, and we can connect through that platform as well. If you want to make sure to get all my stuff and not miss out on anything and get more awesome videos, then that would be highly recommended, because as you know, there's this massive communist global censorship suppression thing going on, and it would probably be nice to stay connected. Who knows what's going to happen next. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in another video.